Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicole Wargo. I am a Sustainability Fellow for Clark County's Department of Environment and Sustainability. Please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. And I just want to jump right into our presentation. So let me know if you can see my screen.
We could see your screen.
You don't see my notes, do you?
Nope, you're set.
Okay, good. So again, thank you for joining us. This is Plug-in EV Charger Basics. I am with Clark County's Department of Environment and Sustainability, and I am working on earning our region a designation into the Clean Cities Coalition. We actually recently earned our apprenticeship designation, and we are officially called the Southern Nevada Clean Cities Coalition. We have a really great program here, packed with guest speakers, so I'm going to be really brief so we can move on to their topics. But just for anybody who's new, who doesn't know what Clean Cities is, it's a national network that's run through the U.S. Department of Energy. The goal of Clean Cities is to reduce petroleum fuel use, and that's mostly accomplished through alternative fuels like electricity and idling reduction. The purpose is to reduce dependence on foreign oil, provide cleaner air, and lower greenhouse gas emissions. There are currently 75 coalitions in the United States, but until just recently, we had no representation in Nevada. But like I said, we last month just earned our apprenticeship designation and are working towards our full designation now. If you're interested in participating with Clean Cities, there's different ways you could do that. There are quarterly stakeholder meetings. Our next one will be in November, and I'll touch on that at the end. We have online programming like this webinar here. We do in-person events, and we have an event coming up this week that I'll talk more about later. You can join a working group that we're going to be getting started here shortly. And there's opportunities to support, present, and host like for programs like this. So if you want to learn more, you can grab my email address here, or you can scan this QR code that will take you to our website. But like I said, we have some really good speakers, so I want to jump into that. First up, we have Raheel from NV Energy.
Hi, everyone. Let me share my screen really quick. Okay, great. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Cool. All right, well, thank you for joining. Glad I get to kick it off. So let's see how I set the precedence for the rest of the presentations. So my name is Raheel Sadiq. I am a project manager within the Renewable Energy Department at NV Energy, specifically within electrification. So today I'll be going through the few things that Nicole, mentioned that we wanted to bring up during this presentation. One's going to be process for new projects, whether you're installing on a new construction site or whether you're upgrading your existing infrastructure. There's also going to be a little bit of the process within our distribution team. That's very vital, as every single project has to go through that process. So I'll be laying that out. And then some tips for reducing EV infrastructure costs, because money's vital for every project. Our economic recovery, transportation, electrification plan. I put ERTEP because that's a mouthful. We're going to do an overview on that. Some contractor information for everybody to have, and then some additional information too. So what's the process for new projects, right? So I'll be going into details about each one of these bullet points. Obviously, you have to create an account and application, your property type and location, your contact information, project information, the load information, and then your design initiation acceptance. So creating an application, right? So you have to go onto our new project portal. It's our new construction portal. It's been updated. You go there, you register your account, you create a new application. Now, what does that application consist of? So we start off with the property type and the location. It's really important to know whether it's a residential project, commercial project, mixed use project, something of another type that you can describe. And is this new service or upgrading service? So since we're talking about electrification today, do you already have chargers in place? Do you not have chargers in place? That's where you'd be answering this question, right? And then your name of the location and the project name. You'd want to put an identifier that helps you track the projects in case you're going to have multiple, some sort of name that helps you sift through it a little quicker if you're checking on updates. And then the APN's required, right? So we need the parcel number to be able to specifically identify that site, and it's not just the address or the cross streets. And then the contact information. So if it's an individual who's applying, sure, put your name down, your contact information. But if it is a business or a company that's going to be handling this project, we do require a business ID to be input as well. Now the project information. So when is the on-site construction expected to start? This is important, obviously, from an energy utility to be able to expect when we should be ready to supply something or when we should be prepared to have something on deck. When will the power be required for the first meter? So this can sometimes occur before construction is complete. Sometimes new construction sites need power that's available maybe at nighttime, maybe not during regular days when the sun's out. And then the estimated completion date. This is important, obviously, for not only metering purposes, but overall logistics as well. And then the description of the project. What kind of project is it? Since we're talking about EV chargers, hey, we're placing 20 chargers west side of this building. This is to improve electrification, whatever it be. So that description needs to be thorough. And then if there's any temporary service required, right? Like I said, sometimes you need temporary service that is going to happen only during certain times of the day, or even certain phases of the project. Maybe phase 1 doesn't require it, but phase 2 does, and then phase 3 doesn't again. So that's another important question that we ask. And then additional project information, right? We want to understand where these funds are coming from. So are federal aid funds being utilized for the project? That's a simple yes, no. Any utilities, local, state, federal, or private entities that could conflict with the project. So you know, maybe there's some contractual agreements you may have in place for your site, or there may be some sort of governmental lock on the site, right? We want to be able to be aware of all that before our lineman or our team evaluates that project. And then any utility removals. You don't want to start trenching, you don't want to start digging, and then all of a sudden you run into a gas line or a water line, and then the project's on hold, and then there's delays. So we want to be able to assess that site before we do anything. And then we get into the renewables aspect. Is anything going to be integrated that's renewable within this project? And obviously, will electric vehicles chargers be installed during this process, which for this presentation, it's a yes. And then the electrical load, right? Obviously, if you're implementing new EV infrastructure, your load's going to go up. So what is the project type? Obviously, we want to dig a little deeper than we did in the beginning. Is it commercial? Is it industrial? Is it a hotel or a casino? Something of that sort. And how many numbers of new units? So everything comes with a KVA and a KWH. We want to be able to assess that and understand if your site even has that type of power to facilitate. And if not, what kind of upgrades will come with that, right? The voltage and the panel size, that also plays a factor into everything you'll be implementing. And then how many panels and how many meters per panel. So all those things really matter when we're assessing the sites. And then the design initiation acceptance, right? If you are submitting on someone's behalf, or if you're a contractor who's working in accordance with a site, Obviously, authorization will be required to be submitted in order to move forward with that project. But if it is the site itself or someone who's authorized, then that's why it says it, if applicable. And then you just submit the new construction application. That goes over to our team, and then we get into the next step. So that goes on to our distribution team. Then our distribution team takes it from here. Our distribution team has to understand that the DIA has to go back to the customer. The customer has to sign it, right? The customer has the luxury to review and approve. There are timelines that are set within this. Obviously, your project, your district coordinator would coordinate all that with you. So once that's assigned, the district coordinator's job is to set up a meeting, go over the design, answer any questions, any logistical questions, any infrastructure questions, and then just a full-on design in question. And then obviously when the design's completed, that's provided back to the customer to review and set it through their legal team, whether it be their engineers, whoever it be, they have that luxury to do it. But at this stage also, if there's any governmental approvals required, that happens here as well, because we want to work that in tandem with customer approval, because we don't want things to be delayed and one after the other. And then are there any easements or land lease agreements that are required, right? A lot of projects that we do on our end do require that. That's just so easements are to make it a little easier for the NV Energy staff to be able to access the site, not having to contact the site every time they need to do something, and then land lease agreements in case we are providing any infrastructure that is ours that goes on the customer's site. And then obviously get to review it once again, sign it, and then finally the contract. The customer contract is the full-on agreement of every contractual boundary you can think of. Once the customer signs it, they then submit their payment. And once that payment is received by NV Energy, we can start the inspection and get ready for a release. And until the release happens, the NV Energy line crew can't start any construction. But once that is done, then that's the last step. NV Energy line crews are sent out and ready for construction. And you see on the left side, this process, this whole process from step 1 to step whatever 13, NV Energy distribution process can take up to 87 weeks. That's max, but minimum is 24 weeks. So you're looking at a few months to over a year and a half, depending on the complexity of the project. Okay, so next. Cool. So here's some tips for reducing EV infrastructure. Passing costs on to consumers. That's a great way to recoup some costs that went into the infrastructure and the construction. That really helps offset some of the costs. I'm not saying you're going to make $1 million by placing a few chargers on your site, but you will recoup some costs depending on site and traffic. And then federal incentives, state and local incentives, and utility incentives. We're talking about those constantly over here at NV Energy. Federal incentives are huge right now, especially with the Biden administration going through the IRA, all of that. State and local incentives. I know some states are a little more proactive than others. Check with your providers. If you're not with NV Energy, I check with the utility and see if there's anything there. And then utility incentives. NV Energy, like we have the ERTEP program going on right now. We've had multiple programs previously, and we plan to have multiple EV programs in the future. It's very important to check with those to help those costs out. And then integrating solar. Right, all the power that's going to be coming out of all of these chargers, and that's going to require the upgrade on the panels and the switch gear and this and that. You can also integrate solar and help offset some of that power. And then the location of chargers. We talked about how if your site is planning on implementing the EV infrastructure on the west side of your campus, but all your switch gear, your panels, all your conduit is already is a lot less extensive on the east side. Let's reevaluate that. Let's understand what are the complexities of trenching around or going through in order to help place those chargers in. And then the procurement volume. We deal with bulk orders, right? Like just in our regular day lives as well. It's pennies off, dollars off, right? You want to check with the vendors and the suppliers on how much are they willing to deal with you if you order in a larger amount. If your project is even within phases and you're going 10, 10, 10, why not try to see if 30 will be cheaper at once rather than going 10 at a time? And then the supply chain awareness. We've all been hit with supply chain issues, right? That's nothing new that I'm talking about. That's just been in all aspects of life today. Just be aware of the supply chain so that way you're not delaying any of your project, having to bring on any maintenance crews to maintain a site that's not even developed, having to have contracts that you're paying that's causing the delays, and you're on top of that. You're having to bring on staff that's monitoring the site that you didn't have to if you would have had these supply chain issues figured out from the beginning. So if you plan on finishing a project within the next 6 months, why not start looking, 2, 3 months prior to that project and seeing if supply chain will be an issue, right? We've come across switch gears being year out, 2 years out. We want to get ahead of that. And then plan for the future. If you're implementing 10 chargers today and you may grow that location by 20, even 20 chargers, even 5 chargers. If you're already trenching and the ground's already open, why not place those stubs in and get those ready to go for the future? Those parking spots don't have to be taken up, but that accessibility to place a charger will be there. So these are some good tips to keep in mind when going through this process. And then the RTEP program, there's gonna be a lot of writing. That's just when I share this slide deck, it's just vital information, but I'll be doing a slight overview of the whole program. So NV Energy's allocating $100 million to the state of Nevada. This is to grow our service territories charger infrastructure. We want to make sure that accessibility and that transportation anxiety doesn't exist going through the corridors and throughout our state, right? We're doing this very strategically. This isn't just a first come, first serve type of thing. This is every site is evaluated, every site is assessed to ensure that we're picking the best place within the state to place these chargers. And then increasing jobs overall is just the economic impact that this brings to our state as well. And then supporting EV driver tourism. We are a big, big state that is driven on tourism. We need to make electric vehicle infrastructure accessible for all and everyone who comes through the state with an EV. So here's the 5 key points within our program. So you have the interstate corridor charging depots. Obviously, the interstate within Nevada leads to Utah, leads to between Nevada or between Reno and Las Vegas, between Las Vegas and Utah, right? We have massive interstates between our major cities. And then you have the urban charging depot, which is more of the downtown and the commercial locations within these urban areas. And then you have the public agency, which is working with the government entities, with the colleges and the universities, and then the community centers, not only within the metropolitan cities, but within the rural counties as well. And then we have our transit, school bus, and transportation electrification plan, which is working with the RTCs in the north and the south, working with our school districts to help amplify their electrification of their fleets as well. And then outdoor recreation and tourism. Like I said, tourism is a large sector of our state. Having that tourism have an impact on our visitors is huge. So we want to place these chargers in places that they'll be visiting as well. So you have the Lake Tahoe, which is explicitly called out, Red Rock, and then the casinos as well, and any sporting arenas. And here's the interstate corridor depot. As you can see on the right side, we've allocated DC fast chargers within this program. The DC fast chargers are so when you are driving within these corridors, you're not having to sit for hours to charge your car, right? It's 20 to 30 minutes, get in, get out, get back on the road. And then we're working with NDOT on a few sites as well. And then this is going to have a lot of accessibility with driving through the state. Now here comes the urban charging. So you have small commercial and large commercial. We're looking throughout the state, understanding where it's strategically best to place these, but with an emphasis on the historically underserved communities. These are based on the census tract, where we go in and we want to make sure that these areas can have accessibility to EVs when those areas do grow, right? We want to make sure that it's the game of the chicken or the egg. Like, do we build it and then they will buy EVs, or do they buy EVs and then we build it? So we want to take the initiative and get ahead of it, build the accessibility, so then that incentivizes people in those areas to be able to buy those and be publicly available. Here's the public agency charging. The public agency charging, like I said, you have the universities, you have the government entities, and you have the small and large community centers. This is just to help those areas amplify their charging infrastructure, especially schools, right? Like the universities, we have 2 universities within the state. They're big on electrification. We want to be able to provide them with that accessibility. And then we want to be able to provide the smaller colleges as well, right? Helping electrify their fleets and also make it accessible for their students and their employees, or whoever it be, or community center members. It's very important. And then you have the tourism site. So this is our biggest site profile. As you can see, 49 to 53 sites is what we're aiming for. This is to help just the overall electrification of our tourist sites and help anyone who's visiting be able to access that as well. And then the outdoor recreation, Lake Tahoe and Red Rock are our focal points here. We want to make sure that those are our biggest tourist sites outside of the sporting arenas and the casinos, that they are taken care of, that they do have the accessibility when people are driving out to these areas, and they want to understand that they don't have to be a part of that lack of infrastructure when they're out in these rural areas. And then the ERTEP ownership model options. I wanted to just throw this on there. This is really important because it shows that we are funding 100% of these sites. The construction is, or the sites are all on us. We've allocated $100 million. We want to make sure that transportation electrification does go forward in our state. You can see the breakdown here. Obviously, I've linked it at the end as well, but the customer has 3 ownership models. They can have NV Energy own, operate, and maintain, or they can do it themselves or with a third party. As the ownership models change, you can see there's different requirements, different agreements that go into place. But then when it comes to public agency and the RTC sites, it's 100% of the approved costs are paid at the claim package acceptance, while the others have the 75% upfront, and then the 25% is broken up into 5% per year as they meet the compliance and the requirements that are agreed upon. And then the tourism program has a cap of $300,000, which is for $15,000 per charger, which is 20 chargers. And then I linked these. Obviously, Nicole will be sharing the slide deck with you, but as of right now, we have the AICP training link on the left side. That's to get your installer certified to be able to be a part of the program and be electric vehicle infrastructure certified. And then you have the NV contractors board on the right side to find any contractors that you may need for your projects. And then any additional information. So I linked the NV Energy ERTEP website to read more about our program. I know I went over it very briefly, but there's a lot more that's in depth that you can go ahead and read. And obviously, if you ever need anything, you can reach out to me or my team. And then NV Energy new construction site, that's the process we went through in the beginning. I've linked that here as well. That portal's accessible 24/7. And that's it.
Nicole, you're muted.
I think you're on mute, Nicole.
Sarah, you could go ahead and start. We're trying to unmute Nicole, and it looks like we're having some technical difficulties, but you could go ahead. Thank you.
No problem. I've just turned my camera on. Looks like it went. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we could hear and see you.
Excellent. Thanks for confirming, Olivia. Let me just get my screen shared and we'll be ready to go. Okay. Olivia, can you confirm you can see my slides?
Yep, we could see your slides.
Excellent. It's not showing up on my screen, so we'll go ahead and trust you can see. We'll call good. Thank you, everyone. I'm really glad to be here today supporting the work that Clark County Clean Cities is doing. I work for Sawatch Labs. I'm the COO here. I've been working in the clean energy space for 15 years and at Sawatch for a little more than 5 now. And what we do is we work with fleets of all sizes to help them figure out if an EV will be a good fit for their existing vehicles and their operations. And then based on that, what kind of charging and where will you need charging and all of those questions that you're asking yourself about how to get charging in the right place. And so we take a really data-driven approach. And I'm going to talk about kind of the general way to go about that and why we would encourage you to really look at the vehicle side of things to help that inform what you're determining you're going to need for your charging infrastructure, both for today or the next year, but also to think about what you're going to be needing in 5 to 10 years to really get to, are there ways you can bring down the cost of installing and upgrading for infrastructure right now, rather than having to trench 3 different times throughout the next 10 years. So I'll give you just a little bit of information about us so you know who we are and where we come from. Our company is headquartered in Denver. We were founded in 2017, and we really focus on that vehicle operational data being the most important thing to look at to then understand where EVs will work for you and what kind of charging you're going to need to support those vehicles. We've worked with more than 180 fleets, ranging in size from small municipal fleets that have 10, 20, 30 vehicles, all the way up to one of the largest private sector fleets in the country that has more than 30,000 vehicles. And operations are different all across the board. And so really understanding what your vehicles need to be and what your drivers need them to be will give you a good foundation as you're planning out your charging infrastructure. One of the things that, if you haven't done this yet, and I think Nicole mentioned based on the survey, a lot of folks are planning on installing charging infrastructure at some point and trying to learn more about how to go about that. Like I mentioned up front, I would encourage you to take a look at your vehicles first. Look at what types of vehicles you have. Look at, do you mostly have a light duty fleet, sedans, pickup trucks, minivans, small SUVs, things along those lines? Do you have a very mixed fleet, all the way from class 1 up to class 8? Because that is really going to impact what vehicles are likely a good fit for replacement. And we would encourage you to take a look at their operational needs on a day-to-day basis. So will an EV do what your driver needs every single day? And if not, when won't it? And is that going to be a big impact on your driver, or maybe a really little impact and it's okay? And the way we like to talk about this is thinking about it from a midday charging standpoint. So if your driver can do all of their driving and not need to charge midday, that's the least amount of impact on your driver, right? In fact, you're taking away the time that they might need to go stop at a gas station and fill up for gas. And so that's ideal. They go out, they do all of their driving, they come back at the end of the day to your depot facility, plug in, and it's good to go. That's ideal, of course. There are many cases where that won't work, where maybe occasionally midday charging will be required. And what we would say is take a really good look at how often that midday charging might be required. We're talking about a fleet that's mostly sedans or light duty vehicles. You know, are you thinking that your drivers are going to need to find midday charging one time a week, one time a month, every single day? You know, what do you think that is going to look like based on their existing operations today? And what do you think is doable for your drivers? And what might be too much to ask of them? And when I think about it that way, I think about there's a opportunity cost if your driver has to spend an hour charging midday, when otherwise they could be doing whatever it is that they do, right? They could be out and about doing permit reviews. They could be out and about meeting with clients, whatever that is. You want to make sure that you're not taking them off the road at a time when they could be doing something else. So I would really say that operational fit is the first component that you want to look at and kind of view that as a go versus no-go decision for each vehicle that you're considering replacing. And then, of course, the other part is the financial impact. What is that upfront capital cost going to be to purchase those vehicles? And then, of course, the charging infrastructure along the way. And is there funding that you can access? You can definitely work with the Clean Cities staff. They'll help you identify available grants and additional funding that you might be able to tap into. And then have a good conversation around what your existing fueling budget is and what the projected cost will be for your electricity budget going up from the fueling that you'll be doing with electricity. Now, we've had some really interesting conversations with fleets that this was a year or two ago in particular, with a very large fleet we were working with, and they were really feeling the squeeze on their budget, on their fueling budget, because gas prices were going up week over week. And they had a quarter into the year, they had blown through what they thought was going to be their fueling budget. And one of the things that they saw as a really big benefit to switching some of their vehicles to EVs is not only would the fueling cost be a lot lower, it would also be very stable. And I would say that's something to be aware of when you're talking about the difficulties of that higher upfront cost, is that you have a pretty good idea what your electricity budget for fuel is going to be for those vehicles, because electricity rates don't change that frequently or that drastically compared to how gas prices change. So something to keep in mind. And then one of the things that I would encourage you taking a look at too is those vehicles that have a good operational fit for an EV and where the total cost of ownership is going to be lower in the EV, target those ones first. It'll be an easy way for you to put an EV in where you know it's going to meet your driver's needs and you're going to save money. It's a great place to start. Okay, so once you have your vehicle procurement roadmap, you know how many vehicles you're going to purchase next year, and hopefully you have an idea of which vehicles you're going to replace with an EV next year, the year after, and for the next few years following that. Now it's time to get to the infrastructure component. And this is a bit of a chicken and egg thing, just like Raheel mentioned. You know, do we need to get those ports in first? Do we need to have EVs first? With the delays that fleets are seeing in from placing an order for an EV to taking delivery of that EV, we know some people who have been like, okay, well, I'm going to place that order and then I'm going to work on the infrastructure. And then turns out, you know what, those vehicles come in faster than expected. I would say it's really important to make sure you are having the full conversation around the vehicle and the infrastructure needs upfront, early, often together, so that you don't get in a position where you have vehicles but no charging, or you have chargers but the vehicles aren't coming for 18 more months, whatever that is. Some of the questions that we hear fleets asking right off the bat, you know, how many ports am I going to need? What level of chargers do I need? Is it going to be a level 2 charger? Am I going to need DC fast charging for my light duty fleet? Am I going to need DC fast charging for my medium duty, heavy duty fleet? What is this going to look like? And you know, where am I going to need them? Can I put them all at one depot? Do I want to put them scattered across multiple depots? Which depots am I going to hit first? And then how do I need to time this out? When am I going to need those chargers to be up and running? Knowing that, just like Raheel laid out, you know, there's a a lot that needs to happen from deciding you're going to purchase EV infrastructure to getting it up and running. And you need to back that into your timelines for planning. So one of the things with these questions is I would say it is worth, these are all great questions, but it is worth thinking about them from the vehicle-centric side of things. And I think it will help you get to better answers for this. So if we go to the vehicle-centric approach, this is look back towards that vehicle procurement roadmap you've laid out. How many vehicles do you expect to replace with an EV this year, next year, the year after? And then look out to 5 to 10 years too, knowing that those are guesses, right? You're making estimates that far out, but have an idea of how many vehicles you expect to replace every single year, and not just a number of like 5 or 10, but like which specific vehicles. You know, is it going to be, I'm going to hit these 2014 sedans that are up for replacement anyway, and I've already done the work to make sure an EV will meet their operational needs. So I'm going to replace half of those, perhaps. You know, whatever it is, have an idea of which specific vehicles and which class of vehicles, because that's going to help you figure out not just where you need to have charging infrastructure to support those specific vehicles, but also what level of chargers are you going to need. Pretty much across the board, for all of the fleets we've analyzed, if it is their light duty vehicles, level 2 chargers are sufficient for the day-to-day charging. Now, there are always cases where a midday charge might be needed. I'm not saying every day, right? I'm saying, you know, that once a month, maybe even once a week timeframe, depending on the level of complexity you're okay asking your drivers to find midday charging. That midday charging is probably happening with a DC fast charger, and it's probably happening out in the field on a public DC fast charger, unless those vehicles regularly return to depot during the middle of the day. But for that overnight charging, that if it's a light duty vehicle, you're talking a level 2 charger is what you need based on what we've seen we've analyzed more than 1 billion miles of data, and that's what we see. If you're talking about medium duty and heavy duty vehicles, you might see the need for smaller DC fast chargers on a regular basis because those batteries are much, much bigger. And that's something to be planning for when you're trying to figure out, you know, how many ports am I going to need. Another thing that we really encourage fleets thinking about and talking with their managers of different departments is, where are those vehicles spending their extended dwell period? Now, this is almost always overnight, but it could be that based on your operations, you know, those vehicles are parking during the middle of the day and they're operating overnight. But for simplicity purposes, I'm going to call this overnight parking because that's what it is for most. So where are these vehicles spending their time for overnight parking? I have worked with a number of fleets where in the fleet management system or in the spreadsheet where these vehicles are listed as being assigned to a certain department, the address that they are listed as assigned to is the address that is assumed to be where they are parking overnight. So let's say it is the Parks and Rec department, and the Parks and Rec headquarters is at 123 Main Street. So there is an assumption that all of the vehicles that are assigned to the Parks and Rec department are parking at 123 Main Street. When we go in and we take a vehicle-centric approach and look at the actual locations using GPS based on where those vehicles are parking, we find that they're scattered. And it's often because they're assigned to a department, but that department has multiple offices. And those vehicles are operating such that they are parking overnight at those other offices and not coming back to the main facility. Or, and we see more of this after COVID really impacted fleet operations, many more vehicles are take-home vehicles. They're still marked as assigned to that 123 Main Street home office or primary office, but the drivers are taking them home because operations have changed. So I would just caution this before you make a plan for your charging infrastructure based on where those vehicles are assigned to. Have some really good conversations, or if you have a telematics system and a fleet management system, look at that data. See where those vehicles are actually parking so you know where they're going to need charging infrastructure. You can save a lot of money up front and a lot of heartache if you plan that out early. Another thing then, and this gets to the what type of charger, how many chargers do I need, and the conversations that hopefully you'll have with your utility is how much energy is each vehicle going to need each day. So look at those vehicles that you are planning to replace in this coming year as a first start. And based on how much driving they're doing, you can get a really good understanding of how much energy they're going to need to charge every single night. Is it on level 2, they're going to need to charge for 2 hours? Is it they're going to need to charge for 8 hours? What does that look like? And that is really dependent on how your drivers are operating those vehicles. I will say one thing to be aware of here is it's more than just the miles that matter. You can use the miles to get a start, right? How many miles is that vehicle driving every day? But if you're driving in cold weather or hot weather, if your vehicles are being used going up a mountain or under load, stop and go traffic versus highway speeds, all of that is going to impact how much energy your vehicle needs to get from A to Z, just like it does in a gas-powered vehicle. But it's good to be aware of that. Not all miles are created equal, and that range that's provided on the battery, is just telling you how much energy it can provide and under average operations, how far that vehicle can go. But the specific operations really do matter. Another thing is, are utility upgrades required? If you are installing even a couple of level 2 chargers, you may need some upgrades. You may not. As you get into installing lots of chargers at any location or DC fast chargers, you are likely going to need upgrades. And that is a conversation to have with your facility staff and your utility. Early, start those conversations. Now, I'm going to show you just a little bit of kind of that vehicle-centric approach and that data that we use to do this. And hopefully it helps you think about how you need to be looking at what your vehicles need so that you can have those really informed discussions with your stakeholders. What we focus on bringing that data out of those vehicles is looking at their operational data on a minute-by-minute basis. And we use that telematics data, so the GPS location and some other data points on how those vehicles are operating. And then we can say over the year, how did this vehicle operate? What is their average energy use, but also what is their energy use every single day for 365 days of the year? And so when I look at this, I know there's kind of a bit on the slide, but what I really wanted to just highlight for you, and hopefully you can start thinking about this with your vehicles as you're planning your charging infrastructure, is this table here, right down here, that says the parking and projected charging locations. So with this example vehicle, what we're showing is it's parking at 3 different locations for its overnight parking, but the vast majority of that parking is occurring at what's listed as the REI flagship store in Denver. And 98% of the time, that is where it is parking. So it's very clear in this case, you know exactly where you need that charging infrastructure. This is one of those things that if you don't have data on it, please, I would encourage you to have conversations with the managers for those departments. Make sure you understand where those vehicles are before you start planning out that charging, where they're parking at night, before you start planning out that charging infrastructure. Another thing that when you're looking at the energy needs, figure out daily how much they're going to need. And so what I'm listing here, and this is just an example of how we do it, is how much they're going to need to charge on average per day. And then also, what's their maximum? Now, you probably don't want to plan for their maximum day, but you probably want to be aware of what that's going to look like, so you have an idea of, what is the extreme situation. Another thing just over here, and this really gets to your conversations with the charging infrastructure when you're looking at planning long-term. So this map up here with the multiple locations, you want to think about how many different locations are you going to need charging infrastructure, and how are you going to need to stage that over time? Now, fleets do this a lot of different ways. We see some fleets with multiple locations decide that instead of doing 2 chargers at one location, 3 chargers at another, 4 chargers at another, all in the first year, what they're going to do is focus on one specific location and electrify vehicles at that location first. So they might pick their depot that has the most vehicles that park there that are a good fit for an EV, focus on hitting a lot of chargers and a lot of vehicles at that location. it can definitely reduce the cost in terms of the planning and the time around it, because you can focus all of your resources on one spot and then move on to the next depot next year or the year after, whenever it's appropriate for you. A benefit of this too is you will have a lot of learning that you acquire through that process of diving deep into one specific location that you can then apply as you deploy charging infrastructure at other locations. One other thing I want to touch on here is the projected charging demand. There are lots of different ways that you can manage your charging, and what you want to do is really have good conversations with your utility around what your demand currently looks like at each facility, and see if this charge, when your vehicles are coming back to the facility, if they plug in and just in an unmanaged charging environment, plug in, charge until they're done, and then stop charging, is that going to impact your demand at this facility during the time at which your facility already has its highest demand? Because if that's the case and it bumps it up, it can impact your demand charge from your utility, which can be a big component for commercial entities, a big component of their utility bill. What it also does when you do take this type of a planning approach, looking at what the vehicles need, is you can understand if there are opportunities where managed charging is going to be worth it to you to shift that charging to different times of the day, and perhaps in the early morning hours. You know, if you can shift this whole charging curve to the time when the electricity rate is the lowest, you can save yourself quite a bit of money on fueling. So I would say, please take a look at, really listen to your vehicles. Your vehicles are going to help you figure out what you need, and you can use that early on to inform your planning, so you're putting chargers in the right place. And you know kind of what's coming in terms of that growing demand. And then the last thing that I would encourage all fleets to do is to really work on engaging your stakeholders early. And Clean Cities can certainly help with this, as well as anyone within your internal organization. We find that the fleets that are really successful at moving projects forward across the board, from deploying EVs in the fleet, but also to getting infrastructure installed on time as needed, is bringing in, of course, the fleet staff. But sustainability staff can be really helpful, because they might be very aware of what those incentives are that you might be able to tap into. Your facilities staff, and they will have a good idea of what your existing utility service looks like at each location that you're considering putting infrastructure. They will also have a good idea, likely, of where you might have space, or where you might have space constraints from where chargers could go. So something worth having that conversation very, very early. And then the utility. And this is great, to have Raheel on here from NV Energy. You want to engage your utility early, because they can help on the planning side. They can help you with some incentives sometimes, but they can also help you identify any potential issues with needed upgrades very early on in the process, so that you don't get through, hey, I've done all my planning, I know exactly how many chargers I want to put here, I'm going to order them tomorrow, and then you find out that for some reason you're going to need a lot of upgrades from the utility, and that's going to slow things down. So please reach out to NV Energy or whoever your utility is early on in the process, and it will save you a bunch of time. Thank you guys for being here. I'm looking forward to the Q&A and the rest of the presentations.
All right. Thank you so much, Sarah, for presenting. Next, we're going to have Marco present.
Hello, everyone. Hold on just a second while I share my screen. All right, hopefully everybody can see that. So I'm Marco Velotta. I'm a planning project manager and the City of Las Vegas's Chief Sustainability Officer since about early September. New role, but a very similar function to one that I've continued on since 2008. I'm going to talk a little bit about the city's EV charging efforts and some of the things that Raheel and Sarah just spoke about, because we've done uh, a lot of planning and preparation for EV charging in the past and continue on in the future. For those of you who don't know, the city of Las Vegas has been working on sustainability in some form or another for since about 2006. Mayor Oscar Goodman signed on to the U.S. Conference of Mayors Climate Protection Agreement at that point. And over the years, we've been able to leverage millions of dollars in NV Energy rebates, federal funding, state funding, local funding. We're able to build a lot of different projects from our Lee Gold City Hall to a number of other facilities with EV charging at them. We do quite a bit with respect to water conservation for recycling, and we've done a lot with respect to EV charging infrastructure. So from a public entity or a local government within the state of Nevada, it's been sort of illustrative as how the process works, as Raheel has described a little bit, because not only are we customers and we're actively trying to electrify our fleet, but provide public parking that's available for the public, for the public to use, as well as enable residential or commercial customers or residents to essentially go through our process, which to a certain extent mirrors what Raheel talked about in terms of the requirements. In 2009, we were the recipients of a congressionally designated project from Senator Reid at that point for what was at that point described as an EV conversion program that ended up needing to be changed because the company that said that they would be able to do something to that effect went out of business during the recession. So we asked the Department of Energy to instead do a plug-in hybrid EV charging demonstration program. So we were the first municipality in the state to purchase EVs and deploy EV charging stations at city facilities. And under this first generation, we were able to do a combination of specific EV charging products as well as off-the-shelf type EV chargers. So we made those available for free. It was also during a time when the legislature had authorized alternative fuel vehicles to be exempt from paying parking fees. So we had a program that was set up for a while until it sunset to allow alternative fuel vehicles of any type to get exempted for parking charges. So we were able to study that and report back to the U.S. Department of Energy, but we ended up installing EV charging stations at a number of community centers all across the city of Las Vegas, as well as our locations within downtown Las Vegas. And we're hoping to continue on with that trend over time to make sure that we get EV charging in the places that they're needed the most, as well as for our own purposes, which include our vehicle fleet. So as far as the planning that we do, our city master plan emphasizes using electric vehicles to reduce overall emissions. And our long-term outcome is that we increase public EV charging station to about one per 10,000 residents, and to track EV registrations over time and see that increase, to see that the overall change in transportation sector emissions. And then we've intentionally aligned with that state legislation, either through Senate Bill 448 or with NV Energy's transportation programs, to specifically expand upon our EV charging stations in historically underserved communities, and look to see how we can adapt to the EV market for the tourism, from the tourism aspect. How do we get people who are coming in from California or other parts of the country or other parts of the region to visit downtown Las Vegas and specifically, and provide them a place for them to recharge. In terms of the requirements from a local government standpoint, we treat EV charging as a standard parking lot. We don't have any additional planning and zoning requirements beyond that. We make the process very straightforward. That said, there are some minor things that do get reviewed, such as is there any loss with respect to the parking that is required under a zoning district? Is the transformer adequately screened? And we do check for things such as ADA compliance, signage, um, things to that effect. Our review process is typically less than a week. The zoning review itself it can be within a day. It's usually less if there is no fire input required, meaning that if you don't have any issues with with the fire code, you're you're pretty much out within 2 weeks. It's very rare that that goes an entire month or longer. Um, we have looked at a future EV charging infrastructure ordinance that Clark County helped spearhead as part of their efforts. We're looking at use-based cases for EV capable and EV installed infrastructure. So that is something that we're actively looking at, and working with one of our city council members to sponsor at an upcoming meeting, hopefully before the end of the year, but if not, early this next year. The big initiative that we've been working on recently is LV for EV, and essentially that is a $5 million request through the Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant through the U.S. Department of Transportation. We have proposed 28 EV charging stations at eight different locations throughout the city of Las Vegas, either a city-owned or controlled location. They're all intended to be publicly accessible, and it also includes an outreach and educational campaign specifically aimed at disadvantaged communities and property owners who are within Justice 40 communities within the urban core of the city of Las Vegas itself. We intend to have everything be ADA compliant, and that is a building code requirement that changed not too long ago. So a certain percentage of the charging stations that get installed have to be ADA compliant and have clear path to the front of the building from the parking lot. We also intend to include security features for public charging safety, so lighting and video surveillance, things like that. We're also looking at ways to at different components to study and evaluate the effectiveness, especially since we're dealing with parts of town where you might not have a high adoption of EV chargers or EV registered vehicles to begin with. We're going to look at how we can increase the overall capture rate of the people that are intended to be users over the next 5 to 10 years. We're also going to look at monitor usage and performance at each of the EV charging stations as a part of this effort. So the overall goals with this is to reduce environmental impact. It's reducing emissions and improve equity, and it goes hand in hand with our 2050 master plan's guiding principles of equity, resilience, and livability. Having this program will ultimately provide public more information as to how to get an EV charger installed, as well as the benefits to EV charging and electric vehicles as a whole. We want to make sure that we address those disparities in transportation. And for the part of town that we're talking about, there's a high percentage of people that do have no electric vehicle access at all whatsoever, let alone vehicle access. There are many people that are transit dependent, or they walk or they bike. So if we could provide an alternative means for transportation for some of those folks that may need to have access to an electric vehicle or a vehicle, period, we want to be able to provide for that. We have selected a number of sites. We used our consulting team did some GIS based mapping to find gaps in the existing charging network. So knowing where all EV chargers are that are publicly accessible, that are displayed on plug share maps or other sources through the Department of Energy, we're able to determine where some of those gaps are in the existing EV charging network. And while there are quite a bit in downtown Las Vegas already, we have many of our city facilities in downtown Las Vegas. So we decided, we need to make some major upgrades at some of our public garages. So not only are we doing some installations there where we already have EV charging, but we're also looking at other opportunities immediately around downtown because, again, we want to have that accessibility for tourists and visitors to downtown Las Vegas, they're facilities that the city of Las Vegas already controls. Most of these locations are within or adjacent to the Biden administration's definition of a Justice 40 community. They're within close proximity of multifamily housing. This also provides that opportunity to get into car sharing and other types of innovative um, sharing models that may allow for a multifamily resident to, instead of having to take the bus, if they needed to go to the grocery store and pick up a lot of groceries, they could instead rent a car essentially from an EV charger and then take it to pick up their shopping needs and then return it when they're done. So we do have them at a number of our facilities. We are looking at other locations where we can potentially expand to as well. And we're also leveraging some of this money with NV Energy's ERTEP program that Raheel talked about. That has been one of the benefits of working hand in hand with NV Energy, as we looked at all the opportunities that we could to put in EV chargers. So in addition to this effort, we are a part of the public agency cohort and are installing EV chargers at two community centers that complement these locations. We anticipate having design getting underway this year if we are successfully receive this grant. We already have a lot of design that is underway for other EV chargers that are not on this list. But if we do get it, we hope to get environmental clearance done early next year and then construction going immediately after that. The educational component will happen throughout, and then the study would happen a couple of years throughout, but we're going to continue that monitoring and evaluation overall. As mentioned, we have our EV charging infrastructure ordinance that we're taking a look at, and then the SB 448 ERTEP EV charging infrastructure expansion is something that we're looking to break ground on very soon. So with that, I look forward to additional questions as we conclude the presentations today.
Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, I switched to my laptop. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Thank you, Marco, and thank you, Raheel and Sarah, also for your presentations. Last but not least, we have Leslie, and then we'll get to our Q&A shortly.
I'm going to go to share. Screen. We had this work last time. Let's see. Okay. Do you see it there yet?
I do not.
Because I did turn it on last time. Accessibility. Let's see. Teams. Yep, team is checked. Oh. No, it kicked me out. Do you still see me?
I see you, but it's just showing that Teams says continue on the browser or join in the app.
Yeah, that's not what I wanted to share. I don't know why.
If you go to share and then go under the windows instead of screen.
Yeah, you and I did it already, but I don't know why it's not. So I go to.
So if you click
share, but it's asking me to go to the tabs. Oh, window. Okay, got it. There. What about now?
I see myself.
Do you see the slides?
No.
What about now? No?
No, I still see Teams.
Because I said share and I chose window.
And then if you scroll through like the windows there, you should have like your PowerPoint or PDF. There should be like a tab for that.
Okay, so I'm gonna go window, Microsoft PowerPoint. Do you see it now?
No.
Because I chose PowerPoint.
If you want to email it to me or Olivia and we can pull it up.
Okay, let me see. Maybe if I do entire screen. Oh, you know what? I think I'm going to do screen 2. Okay, I'm going to try to do screen 2 and see if that works. Because you're on screen 1. Do you see the PowerPoint now? No.
Not yet.
Okay, I apologize to everybody because we went through this on Friday. I mean, and it worked. So, and I'm choosing, it says right here, Microsoft PowerPoint, and I choose that. And for some reason, it just won't show it.
Do you want?
Yeah, let me send it. Yeah, let me send it to you.
And I'll jump to Q&A for a couple minutes.
Sounds good. Mine is very short, but I'll send it right now.
Thank you. So yeah, let's, does anybody have any questions for our first 3 presenters? Or I can kick it off with a question. So Raheel, you said that the process can take 28 to 87 weeks. I know there's a lot of factors for that, but is there any way we can speed up the process if someone was, going through this with NV Energy?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of back and forth in that process that I showed of customer engagement, right? So it also depends on the customer's feedback and their review and their legal teams, right? We want to make sure that everyone has enough sufficient time to review what they're going to be signing and what they're signing up for. When you actually go through the process, there are actual set timelines for each side to be able to go through something. It just adds up to the mins and the max that come out to 24 to 87 weeks. But yeah, expediting obviously ends up in not only in your plate, but NV Energy's plate as well. And then the district coordinator. So I can't tell you how to speed it up, but yeah, internal logistics don't always play, you know, a faster role in all of this.
Thank you. If you want to raise your hand if anyone has a question.
I just sent it to you, Nicole.
Okay, thank you. Marco, I did have a question. You mentioned ADA for your chargers. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like what's required or what you're looking for?
Yeah, essentially, in the building code, there was an amendment that was made this in the last year that requires ADA compliance from parking lot to front of the building. So the chargers themselves have to be accessible. In other words, if you were in a wheelchair of any kind, you'd have to be able to access the station themselves, then come back over to plug it into the vehicle, and then from the space itself to the sidewalk or to however wherever the closest point of entry is, you'd have to be able to get to the front of the building pursuant to ADA. Does present a number of issues that we have also encountered with our own city projects. We've ended up having to take spaces to provide for the van accessible loading space that reduces a parking space by one, but if you have enough parking that's provided under the zoning code, you should be fine. It gets into things like exemptions for doing that if you lose a certain number of parking spaces. We also have situations where, yeah, it might not be the most ideal location to have an EV charger. You know, when you consider where the meter is or where the electrical, equipment and switchgear are compared to the front of the building. New construction is totally different. I mean, that it can at least be planned for and accommodated during building design and parking lot layout, things to that effect. But for existing buildings, it becomes a little bit trickier, and it always helps to maybe talk to whoever the local government is and the building or the planning department, and just inquire like, what do I need to do with respect to site design to make this happen? And having to shoehorn these situations in is always one of those things that's very difficult, but has to be done regardless.
Thank you, Marco. And we'll take one more question that was in the chat. I think this is for Raheel from Deb Reardon. Could you share info on the outdoor recreation charging funding opportunity? We can pass this along to the Regional Open Space and Trails Work Group, which includes federal, state, and local parks and open space managers and staff.
Yeah, that would be great. Actually, what I will do is, Deborah, if you can drop your email in the chat, I'll send an email with our project manager who actually handles the outdoor recreation program, and then get you guys in touch. And that would be great if you could forward all that information.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, so I have Leslie's slides. Let's hop into her presentation. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, you're good.
Okay, and then Leslie, if you just want to tell me when to forward. Did we lose Leslie?
Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for the technical difficulties, even though we practiced. So my name is Leslie Mujica, Executive Director of Las Vegas Power Professionals, and I represent IBW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 357, and the Southern Nevada chapter of the National Electrical Contractors Association. The reason why I mention all that is because together if we can go to the next slide. Are we frozen? We're frozen.
They moved it. Does
Yeah, I didn't move.
Okay. Having lots of problems today, it seems. I'm going to send this to Olivia and hopefully her computer is working a little bit better.
Nicole, it was showing. You would just have to click on the left panel.
On which panel?
Go ahead and share your screen again.
Nope, nope, not those ones.
So in our industry, we saw the need for safety, especially in this ever-changing world of the electric vehicle infrastructure. Technical requirements change and safety imperatives, which is one of our priorities, and performance integrity. All these things were so important that all these minds got together and created this program. As you can see, some of our stakeholders are automobile manufacturers, municipalities and utilities, even electric vehicle supply equipment companies, and state and local inspectors, and first responders especially. Next slide, please. So these are some of the founding members that approached us and asked us to come up with a program. Again, having safety being paramount. We worked together with the universities and were able to put all this together with their help and grants. EVITP is a nonprofit. We exist to train. Next slide, please. Some of the curriculum, and this has been updated. As you can see, this is EVITP 4.0 because it has been updated 4 different times, and this was 2020. We're working on another update right now. You can see that the training involves level 2 chargers, and now fast chargers would also be part of this for commercial, DC fast charging, heavy duty, and troubleshooting. If we go to the next slide, this is some of the curriculum, just to give you an idea. Electric vehicles and what they are. I mean, I know that seems obvious to some of us, but this is a very detailed program. We also talk about electric vehicle supply chain. We can go to the next one. National Electrical Code, load calculations. Next, please. Site assessment, which both Raheel and Sarah talked about, and commissioning. We can go to the next one, troubleshooting. And then this tells you about the exam. Oh, and here it is, EVITP 5.0 will be introduced soon. These are the different types of chargers that you can see. We even have the induction where the truck is, and we can move to the next one. This is a Proterra. I believe this is up north. And we can go to the next one. Again, different types of chargers. Next one. Next one. So this is this talks about the eligibility for the program, the minimum requirements. They're of course different. This is a nationwide program, so there's going to be different requirements throughout the United States. That's why we recommend that you contact, that you go on the website and contact, of course, here we would contact the state of Nevada and our JATC, which is our Joint Apprenticeship Training Institute. Next one, please. This tells you about the course. So it's 20 hours of training. And it's demand-based online training. The current fee, I'm not sure if that will be going up or staying the same, but it's $275. And our main office is in Michigan, which we probably don't want to talk about right now since there's stuff going on over there, but let's move to the next one. So why do we need training? You know, you cannot just hand an electrician a charging station and say, here, install this. There's different parts and components, and again, it's dangerous not to do it right. So the training, education, safety, also performance and reliability, risk and liability. Also, both Raheel and Sarah mentioned that you have to plan for growth, or, you know, so that's one thing that our trained electricians can help you with is, instead of, let's say you hire one of our electricians to put in 2 charging stations, they will advise you on, you know, you may want to, you know, pull cable for 4 because this is going to grow. So there is that area as well of, you know, becoming your trusted advisor. Next slide, please. So this is just, you know, a small example of what could happen if it isn't done right. Next slide. These are some of the precedents that have been set throughout the United States. As you can see, Nevada is one of them. It is a requirement. I believe Marco mentioned Senate Bill 448. In Senate Bill 448, EVITP is a requirement. Next slide, please. How are we different? Well, it's a non-proprietary and brand neutral versus brand focus. Basically, so you're not going to be trained on how to do Tesla charging stations. You're going to be trained on how to do all charging stations. EVITP, again, is a very in-depth training program. Heavy emphasis on codes, standards, and again, safety first. And it's the only training in the US Department of Energy Clean Cities Guide. Next slide, please. This is the website, if you want to take that down. And this tells you about the certification. Next slide, please. This is where we are throughout the United States. When you go to the website, you can click on Find a Contractor, and you would find who has already been qualified. And I believe Raheel also mentioned that NV Energy also provides that link. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like when you go to Find a Contractor. Next slide. This just tells us about where EVITP is mentioned, the plug-in electric vehicle handbook. Next slide, please. Here's an article about the program. Next slide. I think this is a repeat one. Here we go. Again, talking about this is being in the training magazine, the vehicle handbook. And last slide, please. If you have any questions, there's one more slide with my information. Please feel free to contact me. And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties. I think this would have gotten much better, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Leslie. And thank you for, working through with all of the technical problems we've been having. But yeah, does anyone have any questions for Leslie or our other speakers?
Nicole, I put one in the chat. I was just wondering if there are any prerequisite applications or courses before that electric vehicle training.
Yeah, I think if we move to, it was on slide eligibility, maybe slide 13. Can we put that up? I think one more. There we go.
Okay, thank you.
But if you would like to, I'm sorry, is this Deb?
No, this is Olivia with Clark County.
Oh,
I
hi,
was
Olivia.
just curious.
Yeah, and I'd be more than happy to come in and chat with you guys more in depth about this.
Thank you, Leslie.
I think there was a question in the chat from Joey. Are there any plans to install chargers in state parks or along non-interstate highways? Maybe Raheel has some information, but I also know there's what's called the NEVI plan, NEVI. All the states are working on that, and they're working to connect both interstates and the major roads within our state with charging infrastructure. But Raheel, did you have any updates from MV Energy in this?
The interstate corridor is still identifying sites. We are working with the NEVI program, right? And DOT as well. So that's all in coordination. I don't know exactly where those sites will be, but I know we're working with those entities.
Leslie?
Yes, Raheel, would it be possible to go back to his presentation and look at the slide for the tourism that he mentioned, the corridor?
Do you still have your slides up?
Yeah, I do. What did you want to see, Leslie?
The plan for the tourism. I think you mentioned tourism, and I think it was probably after public agencies, or it was right before. Yes. How did you, and I apologize if I didn't understand it, but how did you say they were going to start? I mean, is there a particular area that they're going to start these with, or is
for the tourism program?
Yeah, so the program's open to any casino that wants to apply for these?
No, so it's the gaming corridors. They're specifically identified within the counties, within the districts.
Okay.
So the gaming districts, like if you were to Google the Las Vegas gaming corridor, you can see the map and the outline of which casinos lie within there.
Okay, thank you very much. That's what I wanted to know.
Cool.
Are there any other questions? I know we're getting to time here, but I want to make sure everybody had a chance to ask their questions for our speakers. Okay, well, thank you for joining us. I did just want to share very quickly. I'm going to try to pull up my slides. We do have some events coming up. So first is our Drive Electric event that's this Saturday. It's going to be a really big event down here at our building at 4701 West Russell Road. It's from 12 to 4 p.m. We're going to have ride and drives from a handful of vehicle dealers, and we're going to have some demonstrations on how to plug in an EV. We're going to have presentations about Electric Vehicle 101, and there'll be food vendors. There'll be some people bringing their own cars that you could see on display. So definitely come check it out. If you want to scan the QR code, that will take you to RSVP and you'll get a gift for signing up. Then on Thursday, October 19th, we're going to be having a webinar about electric recreation. So we're going to talk about electric boats, ATVs, and some other ways that you can recreate with electric instead of gas. And then we will be having our 1-year stakeholder meeting for Clean Cities on Wednesday, November 1st. It'll be in person, and it will be from 12 to 1:30 at our building on West Russell Road. So thank you again for joining us. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or the speakers, and you can scan this QR code to take you to our website. But thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.